and such. I figured I'd make a video for this topic, going into some of the Dominaria spoilers that we still don't have pictures for yet. We're just talking about the implications in Modern, as there are quite a few cards that might make a splash. I'm going to take this in order of my personal opinion, what's most likely to see play in Modern, all the way down to what almost certainly won't see play in Modern, but was worth a glance at least. You can read the top, or you can just roll along with me as I go through, and I explain why I made this list and what order they're in. So first we're going to start with Tatsuko Umezawa, Fugitive. I haven't seen a lot of comments on this card, which I find to be rather odd. A lot of people are speculating on like that 3-mana blue flyer and all this nonsense. Just doesn't really make sense to me. Tatsuko goes into the sideboard of Infect, where a lot of decks are going to try and combat you on a creature scope. They're going to say board in Lingering Souls against your Inkmoth Nexuses and your Blighted Agents. Tetsuo Umezawa does a great job of saying, well, suddenly all my Infect creatures are Blighted Agents. He does fit in more of a spell slot, as he isn't an Infect creature, but I'm certain there are some matchups where you're actually going to want this effect in Infect, so don't sleep on him. I think he's going to be around $1.50, $1.75 at the very least. I think he's probably the most likely card spoiled to have an impact in Modern, just because of his presence in an existing deck. Now let's go to a card that a lot of people are talking about, and they're kind of right on, but I think is a little overhyped, and that is Dampening Sphere. Dampening Sphere, you take a look at it and you say, hey, this is hate for Storm, this is hate for Tron. Both true. I want you to recall people back to precedent here. There is a precedent card that is very similar to this. I'm sure not a lot of people playing today remember the days where Pod and Twin were both legal in Modern. But when they were both legal in Modern, there was a Torpor Orb as a single hate card for both the decks. And both the decks were Tier 1. I mean, they both had answers in the form of the Exalted 2-drop for green-white, that Kasali Pride Mage, and stuff like Cryptic Command on Torpor Orb. I win the game afterwards. When you take a look at Dampening Sphere, it interacts with some more linear decks, such as Storm, such as Tron, and the impact this is going to have is going to be less about taking those decks out of the meta, and more about having them pack a little bit more artifact hate, potentially. We're talking Tron, if they weren't already putting in maybe an extra Nature's Claim. Storm has answers, they can bounce it with Echoing Truth, they can do a bunch of stuff. Storm in general has had to deal with certain hate cards, and this will be no exception. I think it'll start really hyped, probably somewhere around $6, and it doesn't deserve that. It'll end up around $2, and eventually people are going to kind of realize that sometimes you just don't have the sideboard slots for this, and it's very hard to justify more than one sideboard slot on this card, unless your meta is completely out of hand and it's just mono Storm, mono Tron, which, sometimes feels like that's the case in Colorado. Anyway, let's move on to the most powerful original card that is most likely to shift things in Modern, and it's a card I'm super excited for, Mox Amber. I don't know if you guys have gone to Frank Carson's article where he discusses this card. I think there's more room to experiment with this card than what he's talking about, but it's certainly a starting place. And anytime you look at a Mox like this, I remember when Mox Opal was spoiled, people were like, oh, it's just going to be too slow, it's not going to be online until like turn 2, and it's probably not going to do so much then. And I don't know. People were very nervous about it. Is my point. A lot of people were saying that it's obviously ridiculous, and it fits into these sort of cheap artifact affinity style decks. But it's like the best card in those decks, and if it's the best card in those decks, I hesitate to say that there won't be a deck that can make this work. Um, Even if there isn't one right now, there certainly will be in the future. So this is a card that it might flop on release, but it's a card that I wouldn't mind picking up if it does flop, just as this is going to be good at some point along the lines of um, the Lotus. Discard your hand, Lotus. Guy, freaking bad with card names today. Lion's Eye Diamond. Like, there'll be a time where this is good. If it's not already here. Anyway, on to Broken Bond. This is a card I'm a tad bit nervous about, just because, well, Broken Bond, obviously, like Artifact Enchantment Hate, it's competing with Nature's Claim in a lot of these decks. And primarily you're going to want this in probably Primeval Titan decks. Putting a land from your hand on the battlefield is a good effect. It's just, I think, one that is generally overrated. You do need the land in your hand already. That said, it is very good. I mean, it's going to see play in Primeval Titan sideboards. It's competing with some things, but it's not competing with good enough things to say that this won't see play. So far, I do think all four of these will either see modern play, break out a new deck, or potentially see modern play in the future, guaranteed. Anyway, let's go on to my favorite Magic card of all time now, if it will load. Nabon. I'm going to be posting this on the FNM group, my Facebook group, as well as potentially other sites. For those of you who don't know, last standard deck I played was Blue-White Panharmonicon, and I freaking loved it. I love Panharmonicon. The effect is so ridiculous on Panharmonicon, and it felt worth 4 mana so often that when you're taking a look at a 2 mana iteration that has the same sort of effect, it is just a really well designed card because it forces you to be in a tribe that is kind of underutilized. But if you take a look at modern, we have Vendilion Click, we have Snapcaster Mage, we have Venser. This is the most notable thing, is Nabon and Venser, where you just get the Eternal Command to lock. For those of you who don't know, the best way to do this right now is you have Eternal Witness and Cryptic Command, and you just basically rebuy your Cryptic Command with Eternal Witness, vialing it in every turn. Venser locks are softer locks. They're not really seen very often, but Modern is a place where you could see a Venser lock as just like a supplemental strategy. Venser Shaper Savant, which is a wizard with flash, 2 and 2 blue, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to basically return a permanent or spell to its owner's hand. So with Nabon out, you can return their spell to their hand, essentially remanding it, and then return Venser back to your hand. So you can rebuy the Venser, so to say. So if your opponent's deck is fairly slow, typically can't make multiple plays a turn, that sort of lock is actually very effective against them. And you can even, Venser's just a good card in general, and sometimes when you're ahead you can just Nabon into Venser, and then potentially just Venser, bounce 2 of their lands or 2 of their creatures, and just get a huge tempo swing. So the big question is how to build this deck, presumably because you're going to want to play Jace. Potentially you want to play Master of the Waves. Like, the 4-drop options are very difficult to narrow down on, and I don't think you can do all of them. Master of the Waves is a card that already kind of wins or loses pretty heavily without help, so I'm it's my suspicion that you're going to want to go with the Jace Venser route potentially until they reban Jace if they do so, and then you can take a look at Master of Waves if that is a thing. Past that, Nabon is just a really, really well designed card, and I'm very happy they made this. So, let me move on. Can't fanboy over my favorite Magic card too much. Let's go on to Goblin War Chief. Goblin War Chief sees a lot of play in Legacy. It's something that I think modern players are going to underrate slightly. But the question is really, like, do modern goblins have a room to play, like, 4 War Chief into Siege Gang Commander and that sort of thing? My gut says yes. This basically either shapes and changes the look of the Goblins deck to be something that runs a little more mid-range, but doesn't slow down too much for doing so, or Goblin War Chief's just terrible and it doesn't see any play. So, probably going to be somewhere in the middle. We'll see how it goes. This is kind of up in the air. Next up, and a card that I think a lot of people will question why it is so low, and I'll explain in just a second, is the new Karn. Let's get into this this little highly contested opinion that Nabon is more likely to see play in Modern than Karn. The issue with cards like Karn here aren't that they aren't powerful. It's that the shell that best utilizes them is an artifact shell, and artifact shells that are not affinity have very difficult times being compared to affinity, because when you take like an artifact shell like say Isochron Scepter or like any other artifact shell, there's a reason there's not too many well-known artifact shells out there besides affinity. That's just because anytime you build an artifact deck, you have to compare it to affinity, and most of the time you're just looking at it and you say, well, affinity is just better, and given all the hate, I can't afford to play artifacts if I'm not playing affinity. This generally isn't an issue in my opinion. I think affinity is actually a really healthy deck for Modern. Maybe slightly controversial there, but I really do like the deck. Karn is too slow for affinity. Yes, I'm willing to say that. That could bite me in the ass, but I put good money that Karn is generally too slow for affinity. Potentially in the sideboard, but even then, like if you're getting up to 4 mana, I'm pretty sure you have some bigger problems. And in non-affinity decks, what are you really doing with this? Like, we have Jace the Mind Sculptor in the format, so you're not really playing a blue control deck with Karn. I mean, look, he's good, but he's not Jace the Mind Sculptor, so you're not looking at a blue deck. Maybe Mardu control? I mean, it's a pretty big stretch, guys. Especially since, you know, if you're playing control, you probably want to be playing Jace if you want to play a 4 mana planeswalker at all. So sorry, Karn. It's just like your best shell is just not going to be good. Your other opportunities outside of being in a artifact deck are just outshined by Jace. So I doubt Karn will see play, but I've been wrong before about this sort of card. So take that with a grain of salt. Next is Steel Leaf Champion. Look, is this going to see play in Modern? Sure. There are green Snoppy players out there. They'll take this potentially over Leatherback Baloth. I don't think the difference between 4 and 5 toughness matters too much. There's a chance that, you know, you bring your Snoppy deck and you start packing Steel Leaf Champions instead of Leatherback Baloths, and suddenly, you know, everybody starts bringing Flame Slashes and you switch back to the Leatherback Baloths. I mean, it's just not too much to say here. Like, it's a big creature. It does what you want it to. It's not going to see play outside Green Stompy. I mean, it's just not good enough. the ability is kind of nice. So it is probably just better until they start like bringing in like flame slashes, but still, I mean, it's a really good card, but it's not pushing anything new, right? Like, it's not going to be in a tier 1 deck. It's not going to push Green Stompy to be even like a tier 2 deck, so we can mention it, give it a head nod, and move on with our lives. Gitu Lavamancer, it's not as good as Monastery Swiftspear, it's not as good as Goblin Guide, and there's no room for it, so cool card, but not going to be played in Modern. Potentially played in Standard, I'm not sure. So, but we don't have to worry about it in Modern. We're starting to get down to this like tier of cards that are worth a nod, but I don't think we'll see play in Modern. So keep watching if you think there's a card I'm wrong about, or you can just shut it off, unless you just like hearing my voice or like hearing my reasoning, in which case keep watching. So, Wizard's Retort, I mean, I love Silumgar Scorn, and if dragons were better, it'd be great. The issue with Wizard's Retort is, okay, you know, Wizard's Retort should probably be here, along with Steelleaf Champion. To really get this off, like, with the most power that you want it to have, you're going to want to be playing cards like Sage of Abatir, the 1-mana wizards, Martyr of Frost. So in a low to the ground blue base deck that runs a good amount of wizards, this could see play. I mean, the big question is, would a Naban deck want it? And my gut says no. I mean, it's just, you need to have a wizard on the battlefield, otherwise it's complete trash. And I think a lot of the times, it's not going to be that great. So, yeah, stick to your other cards. And even in like the aggressive blue decks that are running both those 1-drop blue wizards, you have Spell Pierce and you have Mana Leak as generally the preferred counter spells in those sorts of decks, and I'm not sure this is like actually ready to uproot that. In fact, I'm willing to say confidently that it isn't. So, don't think Wizards Retort will see play in Modern along with Lavamancer. Wizards Lightning, it's a matter of, is any deck going to want 4 more copies of Bolts and runs enough wizards to make it good? Answer for Modern is certainly not. It's very well balanced to make sure that it doesn't like hurt too much. People are talking about, you know, like you play 4 Lightning Bolts, 4 Wizards Lightning, 4 Snapcasters, and then you just go to town with Naban. It's just, the issue with that isn't that it's good. It is good. Like, if you get all that off, it's like super good. The big issue with that is you're living in a fairy tale, really. I mean, you're counting on your Naban living, you're counting on them not interacting. If you're playing a deck that does stuff like this, why aren't you just playing Burn? I mean, this Wizards deck that runs all these bolts and Snapcaster triggers and shit like that, it's just not going to be better than just playing Goblin Guides, Lightning Bolts, Lava Axes, or sorry, Lava Bolts, whatever. Just going face with all your cards is going to be better. So this isn't like a new strategy. Like, it's not going to be good enough. So, sorry, Ashton. You're going to have to wait on your janky blue-red decks that are just worse than Burn. Merfolk Trickster. I mean, straight up, we have to compare this to Harbinger of the Tides. And it's just not good enough. Like, Boggles has to get really out of hand before you start considering something like this. And then you're talking about like leaving in your bounce spells along with Merfolk Trickster, and it's just a mess. Like, in everything but like the most Boggle-centric meta, you should avoid this. And even in that, it's not that good. So, sorry, Merfolk Trickster. We're gonna have to move along to Knight of Grace, which at first was interesting. Hexproof from a color is really cool. The problem is we have protection from black in Modern. I'm fairly certain. Yes, we do. Okay. So, God, protection is just so much better. Like this is going to go up against black decks, and it's going to say, "Hey, you can't fatal push me." Black decks will be like, "Sure, I can't fatal push you. I can cast Tatsuko, and you can't do shit." Like that's going to be the big problem, is it doesn't fight against the delve threats. So cool card, not good enough. So there's that. Alright, was there anything I missed, guys? I don't think so, but if you saw something that potentially you want me to discuss with you, or if you saw something that you think I might be wrong about, feel free and discuss it with me, either in person, in the comments, and I'll talk about it with you. And I hope you all have a great day.